So for everybody watching on Facebook, I am Dustin Thompson. I am from the Delaware Sierra Club, and I am joined today by Adam Schlachter. Just
Adam.
yeah, there we go. Thank you, Adam from DNREC's Universal Recycling Program. Adam, thank you very much for joining us and taking some time out today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dustin and the Sierra Club, for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, we've Adam, you and I have been in a couple meetings together now and hearing about what's going on with Delaware's recycling program. I thought it was really important that we had you on and got some information out to everybody and advocated for a stronger recycling initiative here in Delaware. So to start out, could you just give like a brief history of the recycling program in Delaware?
Sure. Yeah, so Delaware has a long history of recycling, and we've been doing it since the 70s. We were one of the first states that had a bottle bill, so basically deposits, and you would buy your beverage container or cans of bottles and then bring them back and get those recycled by the store, and you get your deposit back to put down on more bottles and cans. But in 2010, the state decided that we were going to do things a little bit differently. And during that time, we wrote and introduced the Universal Recycling Law. And basically what that did was it provided every Delawarean access to recycling. So in turn, we phased the bottle bill out and created curbside programs for single family homes and multifamily complexes, as well as still maintaining drop-off centers for those that did not want to hire a hauler to come to their house. And ultimately, the result of it is that 80% of the state of Delaware now has access to recycling conveniently at their house, with 20% of our population still utilizing those drop-off centers. And for those who have been in Delaware for a while, that's sort of why all those igloos have disappeared, because now that everyone has the access at the curb, there's less need for drop-off centers. And that brings us to today. So I think you're muted, Dustin.
I am muted. Thank you.
Oh, technology! How we love thee.
So Delaware, and I think it's not just a unique thing to Delaware. A lot of states have struggled with recycling in a lot of different ways. I think some states are a little bit more unique and have certain issues, particularly those states that still have the bottle programs, which I think it's 13 states or something? 10? Okay. Still have those programs, and they come with their own obstacles. What are some of the current struggles and obstacles that Delaware has right now with regard to recycling?
So I would say that probably the biggest issue that we face is that the material coming into our program isn't coming in the way we need it to. And in some cases, we're getting things that we don't want. So for instance, bags are a huge issue at our processing facilities. Those bags wrap around the equipment. It takes hours, sometimes days, to actually remove all of the film that wraps around the equipment out so that we can continue processing all of the stuff that we're collecting at the curb. That's definitely our biggest issue right now. The other issue is, or another big issue I should say, is food. Like, make sure your bottles are empty. There's no reason to put a half-filled bottle in your recycling container. So basically empty it out, give it a little rinse, put the cap back on, and throw it in your cart. And that's good enough for what we need. And then the other sort of bigger issue that affects more of the stuff is if things get wet. I mean, if something has been sitting outside, the top on your cart is open, because we have a single stream program in Delaware, and I should take a step back and say that we have a single stream program. And what that really means for our residents is that recycling is super easy. You can put all of the acceptable materials in a single container. And you don't have to worry about separation. You don't have to worry about the things that some other states do. So because of that, we do have fiber in our carts. And so leaving the top open, if stuff gets wet, or if it gets wet because you haven't emptied your bottles out, that can definitely have an impact on the material once it's at the facility and getting processed. Those are really the three things that we are aiming for. And to get to that, we've sort of created the little mantra of loose, empty, clean, and dry. So that's what we want folks to remember when they're recycling in Delaware, is make sure your stuff is loose, empty, clean, and dry. Not in a bag, doesn't have anything in it. I promise you, we feed the people on the line, so you don't need to keep those crusts in that pizza box. Empty, clean. So again, rinse it out and then dry. Just make sure it's dry before it goes in the cart. Make sure your cart top closes. That way weather doesn't impact your recyclables.
So it'd be good also, you know, in some of these high wind rain events that we've had lately, maybe bungeeing it shut or something like that, right?
Yeah, just make sure that you take that off before your collection day or before they come, only because if you keep it bungeed and you've got automated collection, they're not gonna, they don't get out of the truck. So they either will not be able to pick you up, or they're gonna pick it up. It's not gonna do anything because it's closed shut.
Yeah.
So
good point. Good point. So Mary asked if there was any remaining drop-off locations, or if there's a list, because she has somebody in her family that's their condo association is not offering a recycling point.
So to that point, definitely have her contact us with the condo association. They should be offering recycling service. So that's the first step that we can do. But secondarily, yes, if they go to dswa.com, so the Delaware Solid Waste Authority actually runs all of the drop-off centers in the state. So depending on where they're located, if they go to that website, there is a list of all the locations, so they can find the one that's closest to the condo association for sure.
Thank you. So what about in terms of funding? Is that an obstacle that Delaware, in terms of education and outreach and making sure we're getting this information out? Is that something that you're currently having to deal with?
So we definitely struggle with making sure the message is getting to everyone. That's absolutely something that we are challenged with. But we have been lucky in that we've had some grant funding that we've used to do a fairly extensive campaign. So we've hit a lot of different areas within the state with our message. That funding has ended. So going forward, we are definitely looking at ways that we can better get the message out. So connecting with folks like you guys is a perfect way for us to do that, because if you come to us and ask us for the message, we can give you whatever you need to send out to your folks as well. And, you know, in terms of ongoing education, the good news is that the haulers are definitely stepping up within the state. They are required to do annual notifications to other customers. So that is one way that we can make sure that messages are getting out there and that it's the right message.
Great. We had another question. How does the I assume it's the sorters, handle the institutional organizations that only collect recycling in bags?
So right now,
I've seen this out and about myself when I'm at an event or at UD or something like that, and they have liners inside of their recycling bins.
so I can speak a little bit to UD and certain of the other larger state institutions. They will empty the bags out into their recycling containers before they actually go and get collected. So UD may use bags from a convenience perspective during the event, but they are not putting the bag material into the dumpsters that they then collect to consolidate to send to the recycling facilities. In terms of other places, it's hard to answer that because I don't know the situation. If you know for sure that bags are going into a recycling dumpster, chances are they are not getting recycled. It is our understanding from the organization that runs the MRF that bagged material is being disposed of before it even gets to the process, if you will. We call it pre-sort. Now, that's not always 100% true. There may be some people that are opening bags, but again, our understanding is they are not.
Okay, so that kind of brings up this other question that we've seen a lot. I've seen the headlines. I've seen a lot of newspaper articles and blog posts and things like that saying that like recycling is dead, it's being burned, it's just being dumped in the landfill. Can you kind of comment to some of what we can do to prevent any landfill? You know, anything that's going into the landfill, of course, clean, dry.
Loose, empty, clean, and dry.
Thank you. Loose, empty, clean, dry can help. But you know, why are we continuing to doing this if any of this is actually true?
Right. So one thing I'll say is that recycling is changing, and national headlines do not always mean that is what's happening in your community. And Delaware is definitely unique in we are probably the only state, Rhode Island might at this point, but we are definitely the only state that has a single program for our entire state. So no matter where you are in Delaware, you recycle exactly the same. So to that end, if you're recycling the things that we've put out on our flyers and what the haulers are communicating to you, all of those things have markets. We are not, we definitely do not burn any of the material that Delaware collects. We have an incineration ban in the state, so we don't have any of those facilities here. And all of the recycling that gets collected in Delaware gets processed in Delaware. So the non-recyclable portion, or the things that are contaminated, are being landfilled in our state with our state-of-the-art landfills. So super protective of human health and the environment. In terms of what everyone can do better, really it is the loose, empty, clean, and dry. And we've redesigned our flyer to really picture what we want. So if it's not on the flyer, don't put it in your recycling cart.
That actually goes really easily into this other question. What is the deal with the plastics? The number 5 and number 7 particularly, one of our members here has said that they've read in several places that they are not being recycled. Can you speak to the particular numbered plastics?
Sure. So what I can tell you is that the numbering system is not something we go by in Delaware. And the reason is that the 1 through 7 that has been assigned to a container, bottle, whatever, actually represents over 5,000 different types of plastic. And so we have, again, we know what our markets want. Our markets want any type of container. So we don't look at the number. So if it's a container, either a food container, maybe a container that was from something in your house, shampoo, cleaning supplies, those kinds of things, put it in your cart. That's what we want. We don't want things like toys, like, you know, the file dividers, other plastic things that aren't containers.
What about the fusiform plastic packaging? You know what I'm talking about? When you buy something that's in a plastic that's formed to the item that's in the plastic.
Oh, yeah. So that's a good one. We typically try to stay away from anything that's a mixed material. And usually if you can take the paper out, yes. A lot of times you can't. And so they don't want something that has plastic and paper in it. So that's not really one that we're accepting at the moment, because there's a lot of challenges when you have two completely different types of material together from a contamination perspective.
So a couple more questions on that. Somebody asked about motor oil containers, and what about containers where there may be some debris on the plastic. So you try to take the label off, and that's not, it's not 100% off. Would it be better to discard those?
So motor oil containers definitely should not ever be put in a recycling cart. Given the hazardous nature of oil, even the small amount that's left inside the container is not really a marketable thing from a commodity perspective. So motor oil containers should go in the trash, and the amount of material that could still be left in them if they're empty is de minimis and is caught in our collection systems and processes at the landfill. So it's not going to be anything that we need to be concerned about from an environmental perspective. Labels are fine, because what happens to plastic when it goes to a recycler is it tends to be washed, then shredded. And usually in that shredding process, if they know it has labels or other coatings on it, what they'll do is put it through a secondary wash to remove those. So there's no longer a need to like take a label off of anything in this day and age, because of the way that this technology is set up at these processing facilities that are buying the stuff coming out of our facility. They manage all of that. So it's again, we're trying to make it really easy for people.
Great. What about cardboard? Is there a market for cardboard still? And is there particular cardboards that are preferred?
Who on the call buys from Amazon.com? Yes, there's absolutely a market for cardboard. Keep recycling your cardboard for sure. And really, from cardboard's perspective, no, there's no real difference in it. I mean, there is, Chinese cardboard, they call it, which is a little bit, tends to be yellow. And one of the big issues from boxes that are manufactured overseas is that they don't have the pulp trees we have. So the cardboard tends to be recycled a lot more times into a box than we would normally do it. So they tend to be a different color, which is how you know the difference, but they are absolutely in demand in the US. So recycle all those boxes, break them down, and put them in your cart.
That's right. Particularly right now, I got a letter from our waste company that we use for our recycling at our house. And they specifically said, I'm glad you said break it down, because as we want everything loose, I have had to remind people, don't put stuff in the box and then throw the box into the recycling. But also right now they want the boxes broken down so that way nobody has to touch your recycling in this during the pandemic.
Right.
So,
and just as a follow-up to that too, many of our haulers are moving to automated collection. And what that means is that the driver doesn't even get out of the truck anymore, because everything is done automatically. So if you put stuff outside of the cart, they're not even going to pick it up anymore, because they're not getting out of the truck. So some of that may last after the pandemic is over.
Yeah. I'm also glad that you brought up China, because another thing that has been in the news reports, and I've had some naysayers come to me and say, oh, don't recycle, you don't need to, because China's not taking our trash or recycling anymore. So how is that? Was Delaware impacted by the fact that China has cut down on its post-consumer recycling that they're taking from the US?
It's a great question. And actually, we have been not exporting outside of North America for the last several years, any of the recycling coming out of Delaware. We do send some stuff to Canada and to Mexico. The bulk of the material coming out of our facility is actually recycled here in the US. So the China impact has been zero on Delaware's recycling. So
keep recycling.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't stop. We want it. We're greedy. We want your recycling.
So are there any other do's and don'ts for recycling in terms of the materials that you're more commonly seeing?
Yeah, I mean, really what it comes down to, like I said, we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that flyer was up to date and to visualize all of the things that we knew we have long-term steady markets for, whether domestic inside the US or at least in North America. So it comes down to, if it's not something that we have in our flyer, don't recycle it. One of the big things that happens is what we call wish cycling. And that's a lot of things that people want. They're like, this is recyclable, right? This should be recyclable, so I want it to be recyclable. And unfortunately, that isn't true, right? Like I said, especially with plastic, of those 5,000 different resins, some of that stuff can't actually be recycled. It's just not able to be recycled. So we don't want those things in the curbside program because it definitely has an impact. The big things that I would say, the big no's that we see a lot of, like I said, plastic bags for sure is the number one thing. So really make sure you're not putting plastic bags in your recycling cart, because they, like I said, wreak havoc on the plant, and they're not something that we're sending to a market. The other part of that is foam. So if you get foam packaging, kind of going back to your box question, if you're getting lots of boxes and there's foam, either foam inserts or foam peanuts, that is not something that we are currently able to market in the state of Delaware in the curbside program. Now, that said, in both those cases, so plastic bags and foam have drop-off availability. So remember, not all recycling is going to happen at the curb. And that's one of the great things about our system. We have other programs, some are DSWA and some are supported by DNREC, that provide for the recycling of these things. It's just not everything goes in your curb. The other big one that we see, which is confusing and a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of people, are frozen food and refrigerated containers. So back in the day, all of those things, cartons, frozen food containers, anything that went in your refrigerator that was a paper packaging, used to be coated in wax. A lot of those packaging types have now shifted to a thin plastic layer, and you can't tell the difference. So we, unfortunately, don't have an economically viable market for that material. So we don't want it in the curbside program. And again, people think paper, it's paper packaging, but really it is actually not something that we can recycle at the moment. And a lot of other states do take it.
Talking like TV dinner boxes and
yep. And anything, butter boxes, and just to clarify, that is, these are the thinner paper coats, not your cartons. So not like a soup carton or a milk carton or what we call the aseptic packaging. So the shelf stable products, a lot of soy milks or things, those are actually a different material. Sorry?
Crackers and cookies and things of that nature.
Crackers and cookies are fine as long as it's not a refrigerated package. So if you're putting if you put the paper in your freezer or in your refrigerator, not in your recycling cart.
There you go. So what's the deal with the lids?
Keep your lids on.
Lids on.
Lids on. Yeah, I know that is a good one. And the reason is actually one of the things we didn't really talk about. One of the main reasons we are able to market so much of our stuff domestically is that our MRF has some really, really state-of-the-art equipment in it. And one of the issues we find if caps are left off, especially on plastic bottles, is they'll get crushed and they flatten. And so what happens is they get sorted as paper, not as plastic. So we want the caps on to keep the three-dimensional shape to things. So that way the sort system can correctly, get them to the right place.
Here's a good one for you. Real quick. Milk cartons can or cannot be recycled?
Yes, milk cartons that is the only refrigerated, because a carton is a different type of material than the frozen food or regular packaging for refrigerated goods.
Great.
So yes to milk cartons.
Yes to milk cartons. So the paper, I'm glad you brought up paper. What about books?
Yes. So we ask if you can, if it's a hardback book, to rip the hardback coating off of it, throw that in the trash and the paper in. But yeah, books are absolutely able to go into recycling.
Paperback, no problem, right in.
No problems. Nope.
Great. So we have another question here. Can a community center like a church or synagogue or the Newark Senior Center or any place like that, can they become a drop-off location for like plastic bags and batteries and things that can't be tossed in?
Yes, but there are some things we would have to do with them. So if there is an interest in that, they should definitely call us, and we can look at that and see what we can do.
Great. So I actually have the flyer. I wanted to put that up for a second,
for sure.
so everybody can see the beautiful flyer that you guys over there at DNREC worked on. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
My Facebook is on a 20-second delay, so I don't get to see what you guys
Oh.
see. But I did want to see this so we can kind of all look at it and have it up. And you can find this on the DNREC website for recycling, correct? Right there down in the bottom.
Yep.
If anybody wants to get this and print it out or have it somewhere readily by. And there I see the refrigerated food containers in the no category, right on there.
The other big one that I do want to talk about is coffee cups and the wax cup. So any to-go cup that isn't a rigid plastic should not go in the recycling. It's very similar to the frozen food and refrigerated, the way that the coating is. So unfortunately can't recycle those right now.
Gotcha. And does Delaware have any styrofoam recycling locations?
Yes, there are 3 of them. They are located, the Newcastle County one is at the Delaware Recycling Center on Lamson Lane. The Kent County one is at the Cheswall Drop-Off Center, which is just north of Dover. And then the Sussex County one is at the Southern Landfill, Jones Cross Road Landfill, which is in Georgetown.
Great. And is there anywhere online that people can find the addresses for those locations?
Yep, dswa.com.
Wonderful. Sounds like a one-stop shop over there.
Yeah, I mean, DSWA is actually sort of the operations arm of the state when it comes to running these programs. So a lot of the services they do. So for instance, the last no that I think people get, again, confused about, and justifiably, is the shredded paper issue. So shredded paper, the 2 main reasons we don't want shredded paper: 1, it's usually in a plastic bag, and 2, the paper itself is too small. So by the time it gets through the plant, it's not actually getting recycled because it's on the floor because it falls out. So to that end, DSWA actually offers free shredding throughout the state. So if you do have stuff to get shredded, you can take it to one of those events, and it goes to a manufacturer that makes recycled products. So we know that for sure.
Gotcha. And what about things like cards, like gift cards and things like that?
Oh, the plastic ones? No, unfortunately, those are not recyclable.
In the trash.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay.
Reload it.
What's that?
Reload it.
Reload it. Yeah, reduce and reuse. Great. Well, I think that, we did have one more question online. How have you been, as the department, or you been happy with how the recycling events for the hazardous household materials like electronics have been going?
That's actually something that DSWA handles. We don't have any involvement in that, so I can't really speak to it.
Gotcha. All right, great. Well, unless anybody else has any questions for Adam. Adam, is there somebody that, if people have other questions, that they can reach out to, an email address that we can share?
Sure, we can. We have Delaware Recycles on Facebook, so we're monitoring that all the time. So for your Facebook folks, they can use that messaging feature. They can also email us, recycling@delaware.gov. And then if they go to our website, which is recycling www.delaware.gov. All of our contact information is there.
Great. And I will try to get that in text form on our
Excellent.
Facebook
Yeah.
we did have one more question before we wrap up. So in the COVID area, do you have any suggestions for the retailers who won't allow us to bring in our own bags? Would you know, or who should we contact?
Unfortunately, that is a retailer decision. That's not something that we can do. I will say that it is a temporary thing. I imagine that once this is over, that kind of stuff will resume.
Yeah, retailers aren't going to have much of a choice in terms of the reusable versus single-use bags starting January next year, I suppose.
Very true.
Will a lot of those bag recycling drop-off locations be removed after that law goes into effect? Do you know?
No, they will, for the most part, they will continue to stay intact.
Wonderful, because I know there's still some other facilities that have been kind of kept out of that bill, smaller businesses, for example. Great. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. We really, really appreciate it. I think we've gotten a massive amount of information out to the public. So this recording will be kept up on our Facebook page and will be transitioned over to our website as well, that people can, it'll be archived on YouTube and put it on our website so people can come back, share this and refer to this. If they have any questions, of course, like I said, we will try to get those email addresses into text form. When I do the editing, I'll actually probably put it on the screen of the video, but of course it will be on Facebook momentarily. So thank you everybody that has joined us for the Zoom. Thank you to everybody that has shared this and watched online. We had a really good turnout on Facebook as well. So thank you very much again, Adam. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, and happy Earth Day, everybody.
Yes. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.